This week on In Post, doing some black and white work on a detail from a beautiful church in Spain. Hi everyone, my name is Scott Davenport and welcome back to In Post. So first off, what's with the surroundings, Scott? Obviously not my studio. I'm on the road at the moment. I am back in the US, but had another trip to make. And I didn't want to wait another week before getting a video for In Post put up. So recording something real quickly here in the hotel room. And today's episode is about black and white processing. Many of you had written in asking about, doing a black and white run through on In Post. And from my recent trip to Spain and Portugal, I took a lot of pictures of the details on cathedrals and churches, the stonework and the carvings, and those can make for some very nice black and white photos. So I thought we'd put one of those through the paces. So let's get on over to the computer and give it a go. Here is the original image straight out of the camera, and here is what I've done in just Lightroom. I'll walk you through this really quickly, and thanks to my friend Eve for the suggestions on snapshots. So the first thing we did was just a crop and lens corrections. After that, I did an auto white balance, and it warmed it up just a little bit, and I was happy with that. That was enough, and this really was more the color of this concrete and stonework. Next was the tone and presence. So let me open that up and show you the details here. Sorry, the basic panel. So white balance was auto. I increased the exposure just slightly. This histogram here, this curve, was a little shifted to the left, and I didn't want to just spread all that out. I wanted to center it a little bit more. So brightened it up a little bit with the exposure. Then set the white and black points. How I normally do this is holding down the Option key, or I think it's the Alt key on a PC, and then when you do that and change the slider, you'll see when the whites start to clip. And once I get to that point, just back it off a little bit. And I'm going to undo what I did to keep it exactly where I had it before. And same idea with the blacks. And then increase the clarity just a touch. That brought out some of the edge detail in the stonework. From there, I did a spot heal, and that was just for these couple of things in this concrete here. I didn't want those to be construed as spots when I converted to black and white, so you'll see those two little guys just disappear. And at this point, I just didn't feel, I felt that these guys were crowded up at the top. I'm taking these are the three wise men. My religious studies are pretty weak, but I think that's what this is. And so I adjusted the crop, and so just shifted those down a little bit, gave a little more space, and used these arches to kind of frame each individual person. And with that, we're ready to go over into the photo suite, where I'm going to have a brief stop in effects and then into the black and white module to finish this off. And here in Perfect Effects, I've done only one thing and added dynamic contrast. I'll turn that on so you can see what it looks like. And this is really to bring out the foreground images, the figures here more. So what I did was start with the natural preset, and then I bumped up the smalls details to 9. So natural has that at 0, and I just raised this up a little bit. I'll put in 9. That's what I had. There we go. And that was really to get the details, on the cloak, on these little packages and their beards. Bring those small bits of detail out. Now, what I didn't want to have happen is the background to get too much contrast. So you can see I have a mask here. I'll do Ctrl M to turn on the mask. So I removed the effect from the background. And let me do a quick run through of how I did that. So let me add a new filter, choose dynamic contrast, and we already know our value is going to be 9. Now this is everywhere. You can see the background here has gotten a lot of that contrast as well. Turn off, turn on. And so I kind of did this on a bit of faith and said, oh, maybe the quick mask is going to work. And it did a great job. I was quite happy with it. So right now I'm going to do the quick mask and remove the effect from the background. And I just did this lazy sweep, kind of just ducking in between each of the figures of the men. Let the quick mask do its work. Okay, and it did an okay job. It actually did better than last time, but there's a little bit of cleanup here. So this is where I switch to the perfect brush, turn that on at 100%, and we will, X to paint the effect back in for this man's head and neck. Flip on the package there. There we go, you get the idea. And then I'm pressing the X key again and remove the detail from these final background stones so that I have a decent mask where the foreground elements, which is the little platform they're standing on, and the three men themselves, they're the subject of this photo. And everything else I want to fade into the background a little bit. So you get the idea here. I can clean this up a little bit later. And now the last bit about this, turn off the mask here. What I have now is the contrast is only on the men and the foreground, and there's nothing back here. Well, I want a little bit of contrast. So I will again use the masking brush. I'm going to turn off the perfect brush. I don't care. And what I have at the moment is no effect on the background, all of the effect here. What I want to do is paint in the effect at a lower opacity for the entire image. I'm going to move it down to about 30. 32 is good enough. And when I brush through here, I'm going to make a very, very big brush. Right? And I'm going to press the X key to make sure I'm in paint in mode. You see a little plus in the center of my cursor. You're going to see the mask lighten. Now when I sweep through on the men, the effect is already applied at 100%, so there's nothing else I can add. And so just keeping a single mouse click down and just paint all the way through here, what I'm doing is I'm kind of adding back in about 30% of this effect to the background. There we go. And so I'm going to do a quick undo on that, and you'll see the background gets a little bit softer, and then I'll redo it. It gets a little bit sharper. If you want it to be even sharper than that, I could paint through again, and you're going to see the effect start to show up even more. And that's a good way to separate your foreground from your background, painting in the effect at a lower opacity, so there's some hint of it there, but you're not overpowering the entire scene with just a single blanket coverage. So let's remove that and get back to where I was. Here we are. And so from here, this is all I'm going to do in effects, just the contrast boost. And now I'm going to bring this over into the black and white module to finish it up. So here in black and white, this is the default just as it comes into this module. And for black and white, I tend to start with presets much more often than I do in effects, I think mainly because I'm less familiar with black and white, and also I just like some of the presets. As a matter of fact, one of the ones I'm going to use on this one, it has Bogart in the name, I remember that much, and neutral, that's what I want for this one. I don't want the cool or the warm, I like the flat basic tones of this. So I'm going to click Bogart neutral and just have that applied, and then I'm going to do Command left arrow to hide the browser. And I like where this is started. I tend to like my images a little darker and a little more contrasty for black and white, so I'm going to increase the contrast slider, and you can see that these top edges are getting darker. Of course, the brights are coming up as well. I'm going to keep going here. Yeah, around 24, 25 looks good. I'm also, I don't like what the preset's done with the tone curve. That's kind of made everything very, very dark. I'm going to bring that back to here, bring this back to, actually let's just reset it. We'll reset it right there. And I'm just going to do a very gentle S-curve. So make the darks a little darker, just a touch. And then the brights a little brighter. Again, adding just that touch more of contrast. That might be a little bit too dark. And these are very subtle touches. I'm actually using a trackpad, and I'm kind of just rolling my finger ever so slightly to get these tiny little moves in the cursor to make that change there. But let's see, reset, that's before, and that's after. Yeah, so that's a nice little boost. All right. Now I want these three men to stand out a bit more, so I'm going to add some detail to them, and I'll do that with a detail brush. So it's our contrast brush. There we go. Detail brush. I click on that, and the detail brush works like any of the other brushes in the suite. You've got more detail, less detail, and the amount of 20, the default, is usually pretty good, and I will keep the perfect brush on, and I'm just going to brush through their faces and their cloaks, and this is going to get most of these spaces. I'm going to do Ctrl M, and you can see where it's painting in. Because I have the perfect brush on, it's going to take a little bit more time because of these different tones and textures there. And that's okay. What I'll do for the next one here is I'll turn off the perfect brush so that it's faster for the video, but of course the masking is going to be a little sloppier. This is mainly so you can get the idea of what I'm doing here. And then when you work on your photos, you can be much more precise and use that perfect brush setting. Okay, and our last gentleman over here, do that through his cloak, and then fill in the center. Okay, so generally you get the idea there. So I'm going to turn off the mask. So these guys are popping out a little bit more. One other thing I want to do to further emphasize this is darken the background. So I will go to the brightness brush. And we have a lighten and a darken mode. I'll choose darken. And again, I'm going to turn off the perfect brush for expediency here. Generally will use it to get into these, make sure I only touch the wall and not the cloak. But so that things go a bit quicker here, crank that up, and I'll just skate through around the edge of this person. And something that is nice, you can resize the brush while you're still painting. And that can be really handy because, as you see, as I go from place to place, there's some spots where I need a softer brush and there's some spots that I need a wider brush. You can also adjust the feather with the keyboard controls as well. You kind of have to be a little dexterous with your fingers because you need to hold the shift key down and a bracket key. And I'm able to do that using a trackpad. When I'm using a mouse, not so much because I can't get all my fingers to stretch across the keyboard as much as I'd like. Okay, so I've got the outline there. I'm going to make the brush a lot bigger with the right bracket key and just finish off this whole area here. There. All right. Okay, watching Scott paint is about as fun as watching paint dry. I'll try to speed this up here. There we go. Okay, so that's nice. That's making these three figures jump out quite a bit. And the last thing I'm going to do is check the vignette. It looks like one's been added, but I like to always tweak that. So I'm going to bring the brightness all the way down and the feather all the way down so I can see where it is. Now, something that the black and white tool does not have that Perfect Effects does is crosshairs to position it. I've asked that this be added into black and white because I really like that. Ideally, I'd like to position the vignette just a little bit south of center so that there's more darkness on their heads. But we'll work with what we have, and I'm going to just increase the size a little bit, not to lose too much of the things in the corners. Feather all the way up, and I'm just going to start sliding the brightness back until I like what I see. Somewhere about there. So there we go. That's looking pretty nice. So that is this photo. I think we're done. So that's the process. For this image, the tip of the week, the thing about it is that it has a lot of contrast. There's some very deep blacks and those shadows and those corners and crevices of the carving, and then quite some bright whites. And that makes for a very good black and white photo. Add to that it's stonework, it's a piece of architecture. There's a lot of detail, and that also makes for an interesting black and white photo. You don't have the color to grab your attention, but you have crispness and detail to grab your eye's attention. That's it for this week in post. I hope you've enjoyed it and picked up a tip or two. If you've got a question that you'd like to ask, reach out to me. You can hit me up through my website. Twitter is another good option. Google Plus has still been hit or miss with the notifications, so website or Twitter have been the best. And it's been great to hear from several of you, even this week, sending in your questions and asking about various tools and the differences between certain filters. It gives me a bunch of ideas for videos to do. And as I find photos that'll match up and really illustrate the particular difference, I'll be putting those together and getting them out on the site here. So until next time, my name's Scott Davenport, and thanks for joining me.